Yo, what's up? Welcome to Numbers with Ace Jakari. I'm your host, Ace Jakari, but you already know, call me Ace. And in this episode, we're talking about angel numbers because I did a TikTok and you love the TikTok. So here we are. We're going to talk about it. So if you're liking what you're hearing, make sure you share it on your socials and tag me at Numbers with Ace Jakari on Instagram or TikTok. And all the direct links are in the description of this episode. So I ain't gonna do a long intro so we can go ahead and get into this. So angel numbers is a very interesting topic. And if you didn't see the TikTok, in that video I had said that I don't like talking about angel numbers. But in this case I will talk about them if I need to, and this is my needing to. And I don't like talking about them because there's so much misinformation and it's not something that I've ever seen a numerologist explain in the ways of how numbers actually work. And I have, again, what I had said in that video of how are you gonna have a whole study of numbers and not use it? Like, what are you doing? That's what it's there for. And the reason why I don't like speaking about them is because of everybody has an opinion about it, but nobody has really sat down and, in my personal opinion, or that I've actually seen, sat down and numerologically defined it. It's like, I think that you can get anywhere with intuition. Like you can, and I mean anywhere, like any of these meanings could be valid and resonate for anybody. But on a technical side, and then that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the technical side of these numbers to find a definition, and it's also something that's more repeatable. And something that I see so commonly is that people using the logic of, okay, this number means alignment, or it only means positive things, or it means change is coming, or it means the love of your life is on the way, or you're on the right path. And gimmicky things like that really frustrate me as somebody who has studied the science, but also as somebody who helps people with understanding their angel numbers. And as somebody who works with numbers so closely, you're not even giving the numbers credit for real, because I feel like numerology is really one of those slept on practices for real, because people just hear their life path number, maybe hear about master numbers, maybe hear about angel numbers, and think that's it. But that's not it. It really isn't. When you have such a diverse understanding of numbers, and this is also why I encourage people to learn more than one system of numerology, because there is so many. Me and my 3 numerology systems that I know is not that much. I promise you, it's not that much. It's more than a lot of people, because a lot of people will specifically say that they're only Vedic numerologists, or only Chaldean, or only Pythagorean. And also, most common times what I see is nobody tells you what system they're using. They just say that they're a numerologist. And that's why I try to be so transparent with it, because I want you to understand that if you don't want to learn about Pythagorean or Chaldean or Vedic, I'm not the person for you. And that's fine. There's other people for you. There are 8 billion people on this rock. You will find somebody who you can get down with on a numerological side. So with angel numbers, there's not ever really an explanation past that hyper spiritual, hyper intuitive, it's all good things type beat. But like majority of spiritual practices, there are good things and there are bad things, and those are the ones that I always recommend for people, is where you can see both sides of it. If you can only see one side, whether that be aggressively negative or aggressively positive, those are the ones to be mindful of, because those are the ones that don't really, in my opinion, are very heavily skewed and heavily biased to one side, so you're not getting all the information that you could. And that's, again, something I see with angel numbers, of there's this hyper positivity typically with it, or a hyper negativity with it, that doesn't allow the space for interpretation in the way that I personally believe that numbers can be interpreted. And that I've seen numbers be interpreted, and I've witnessed, and I've watched, and I've learned, and I've studied. I've seen how much numbers can influence so much of looking at your own personal numerology, of how that really dictates everything. It's like, I live with 2 roommates. We all have different numerology, and I, as a numerologist, see how differently the numerology plays out. We do have similar numbers. There's some synchronicities, there's some patterns, there's some reflections, there's connections, most definitely, in the numerology. It makes sense why we ended up living together, in my personal opinion. But also seeing how their numbers in fact impact them and my numbers impact me is an experience in and of itself. And the same thing comes into account with angel numbers. And if we all saw the same number, it would impact us all differently because it sits in a different spot in our numerology, and our relationship with that number is different. So for me, if I'm seeing a number that I already have in my numerology, for example, the number 1, I already have a 1 in my numerology. My experience with having a 1 in my numerology and seeing the number 1 is going to be different than one of my roommates who isn't a 1 or doesn't even have a 1 in their numerology. So it's like things like that, little technical things. And it's like, I do know that this could be like taking quote unquote the fun out of it, but I also want to understand that numerology is one of those things that you can really use to your benefit, especially if you don't have the other information like your birth time or birth location that astrology and human design want to talk about or require you to have a chart created. And that's also what I mean by saying, when I say in my content, like, yo, work with somebody who really knows their stuff and who really understands numbers. And I really emphasize numbers because I'm not saying your life path number. I'm meaning numbers in and of themselves, how numbers work. But let me get into the meat of this episode because I'm like sort of kind of really just ranting because, again, this is not my favorite topic to discuss. It kind of irks me a bit. So we gonna ramble a little bit. So I think that angel numbers first got a bad rap in 2020 when everything happened, everything hit, and that was a universal 4 year. So it makes sense that there was such a mass popularization of spirituality specifically, and also angel numbers. Spirituality specifically, because it being a universal 4 year, it puts it in a position where, since 4 is ruled by Uranus in Chaldean, the North Node in Vedic, and I want to say Mercury and Saturn in Pythagorean, all of that energy is very complex. But needless to say, I say all this also to say that 4 is a very spiritually guided number, and that spiritual guidance is really heavily highlighted on that Vedic side, in my personal opinion, especially with that connection with that North Node. So it puts you in a position where it's pushing things forward. And I always explain 4 as a very chaotic number. It's very disruptive. It's very much in a bag of, I'm doing this because it needs to be done, not necessarily because you're ready for it to be done. And in that, you get a lot of people who have the number 4 in their numerology, especially when it's dominantly placed like in a psychic number or a destiny number. When you have somebody who has a 4 in that dominant position, you get people who do things that are disruptive. For example, Beyonce is a psychic 4. She ain't doing it like nobody else is doing it. Like, she in a league of her own. We already all know this. Like, that 4 is very, very dominant. And I think that's one of the biggest contributors to just the popularization of everything spiritually and angel numbers wise. Now, presently, we're on a universal 7 year. And I think that's really interesting that I'm talking about this in a universal 7 year, because 4 and 7 sit in a numerological pattern because of their rulerships. So specifically in Vedic, 7 is ruled by the South Node in Vedic numerology. 4 is ruled by the North Node in Vedic numerology. And then you also have 2 being ruled by the moon, and the North and South nodes are the lunar nodes. So that's why 2 is relevant. So that pattern of 2, 4, and 7. And this sort of kind of makes me want to look back to, like, what would that be? 2018? I guess we'll get to that's a conversation for another day. But anyways, they sit in that numerological pattern, and I think that that's why there's also a lot of revisiting and a lot of deep inner work that's happening presently this year because of that 7. And there's also a lot of stuff similar. There might be some similar themes between this year and 2020 per se, and that's a conversation for another day. But I feel like that popularization really skewed a lot of things, because in actuality, angel numbers are simply, on a hyper-technical side, numerological synchronicities in the ways that, and I say this in regards to numbers that are like 111, 444, 777. It's the same number repeating itself. Those are technically just numerological synchronicities. And a synchronicity is just a number that is synchronized. It's like, oh, it's the same number. Or you can also call them repeating numbers. It's not numerologically is not anything special in other numerology systems that's not Pythagorean, because Pythagorean puts a lot of emphasis on master numbers, which is another conversation that pisses me off, but conversation for another day. But the numerological synchronicities that angel numbers can be, it really limits the power of the numbers that people might be seeing, because I hear a lot that people see that their birthday, they'll see their birthday all the time, or they see somebody who they care about's birthday, or it's something that's not necessarily a 111, 333, 555, whatever. And I think it's very important to note that angel numbers are not just those numbers. Every time I've ever looked up angel numbers, those are what come up. The 111 and them repeating 3 times or repeating 4 times, maybe 5 times. And that's it. Now we're starting to get into the numerological patterns of 1 2 3 4 or 1 2 3 or 4 5 6, because numerological patterns are also potent as well. But it's only when you see this really blatant type understanding of it, a blatant type presentation of a number, that you're like, oh, that has to mean something. It does, but literally every other number has a meaning to it. You could be seeing 1247, that has a meaning. You can be seeing and also I'm gonna stick on 1247 for a second, because that was just a random number I pulled out of thin air. 1247, that has there's a lot of things you can get for that, because also now I gotta pull up a calculator and stuff, because I gotta calculate the stuff so I can know exactly what I'm talking about. So 1247, if we were to look at this and define it per se, like I said, there's already a numerological pattern of 2, 4, and 7 that exists. So if you look at this on paper of 1247 or 1247, you see that numerological pattern in order of 2, 4, and 7. Now, 1 and 2 work really well together. So does 2 and 4. All of these numbers are actually very amicable, if that's the right way you say that word. They work well together, in my personal opinion, because 2, 4, and 7 sit in that numerological pattern. 1 and 7 sit in a numerological pattern of 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. 2 is half of 4, and also they sit in multiple numerological patterns: 2, 4, 6, 2 and 4, 2, 4, 8. There's a lot that they sit in. So there's a lot of relationality here. And at the naked eye, you're just saying it's 1247. But this in and of itself, and I can go even more in depth, because adding these numbers together, you get 14, and then you're also adding 5 in there. And like I said, 1 and 7 set a numerological pattern of 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So there's so much here, and it's just 4 numbers that we're looking at, but they're not in that numerological synchronicity of 111, 222, so on and so forth. And I think that's very important to be mindful of when talking about angel numbers, because it will never, and it never has been, and it never will be, truly at its core, just those numerological synchronicities that hold weight. I had seen a video of somebody talking about how rare it is to see a numerological synchronicity on the clock or something, and it was some newscaster who's really good at math or whatever, and he did all the math of the likelihood of seeing these numbers. And the same could be said, but things like that, it just pushes this really superficial understanding of numbers that, again, frustrates me, because as we now discovered, 1247 even holds immense weight, because if we define that 1, that 2, and that 4 just alone, and not even address the 5, which I still do recommend you do, and also address the fact that that 5 is simplified from a 14, which also holds weight, you get so much. You have 1 highlighting a potentiality, a greatness, but also an egotism or a selfishness. You have 2 highlighting a community, a connection, a safety, needs, comfort, but also highlighting a manipulation and a coercion, and just a level of communal destruction, and just a lack of safety as well, a lack of boundaries as well. You have 4 being chaotic in and of itself. It's very disruptive. It can be destructive, but it also can be very reliable. It can also be very stable. And then you have 7 highlighting this imagination and this just formlessness and boundlessness that is not containable, but it also highlights an addiction, an obsession, and overindulgence. And you can go so far and so broad with these things. And I'm just talking about 1247 right now. That's all I got right now. That's all we're talking about. And this in and of itself is so just pivotal in the understanding of numbers in and of itself, that I feel like people really don't understand how impactful numbers, when they're seeing them, no matter what the number is, it does not always have to be a synchronicity of numbers that you're seeing for it to have weight, because every single one does. I always recommend that if you want to understand if it's a quote unquote angel number, is if you're seeing the same number time and time again. And it can be a single number, it can be a multiple, it can be, and when I say multiples of 2, 4, 6, 8, so on and so forth like that, you're seeing multiples, you're seeing a numerological pattern of 3, 6, 9, or 5, 4, 6, or 7, 8, 9, something that you're, or even counting down 3, 2, 1. If you're seeing that time and time and time again, those are the ones I say take note of. And it can even be a single number. If you're just seeing a bunch of 9s everywhere and you're like, what is going on? And one of the worst things you can do is just Google it randomly. Because the thing is that, and I know that accessibility is really something that I really care about, and also it's very important. But also, when there's so much misinformation, if I'm the only person sitting over here talking about angel numbers or just numbers on the number side, there's a lot of weight for one person to take care of. I ain't gonna front right now. Like, that's a lot for one person to take care of. But you Googling it is going to every single time give you immense amount of generalized information. It's never going to be personalized for you. And even if you're taking what resonates, sometimes you might not be able to find anything that resonates in that Google search. So then you're just seeing, oh, the number 9 is highlighting of endings, or it's highlighting of wisdom, or it's highlighting of transformation. These are all things that are true, but let's say that if you downloaded my my free guide that highlights or that shows my technique of natural order, you'll be able to look this up. And if you don't, you can go grab it. Again, link is in the description. But if you look and you say, okay, I have 9 over my 2, that transformation, that wisdom, that there's also a passion, there's a creativity, there's a destruction, there's a duty, there's a honor that is evoked of like, I have to do this. If I don't do this, I'm not da-da-da. And if that 9, for example, is sitting over your 2 is highlighting of that emotional state, your community, those that are close to you, those that you love, those that you care about, those things that make you feel safe or things that fulfill your needs, all of those things, that transformation is working in that area, type B. And this is why I think it's so important to understand numbers and not necessarily just where the number sits. And that's the problem that I run into the most in witnessing people talk about numbers, because I've said before of people talk about numerology but don't have any numerological knowledge. Like, it's like going to a doctor's office and speaking to a car tech or something like that. It's like, you ain't in your field right now. What are you doing? And I think it's really just because people haven't got past life path numbers. But everything that I talk about, I'm talking about the number in and of itself. The placement that it sits is very important. I'm not discrediting that at all. Where that number sits, very, very important. But when you hyperfixate on that, you're not allowing yourself to see how much more is an option for this meaning. Because 7 gets the rap of being the number of spirituality, and that is it, and that is something that pisses me off. 2 being the number of intuition or balance or emotions, and that's it, pisses me off. And it's just like, I need and I want so bad for people to understand how much broader the themes are, because it's like 7 also highlights a level of sickness, like it highlights addiction and hyperfixation. Like, there's so internalization, there's so much to all of these numbers that you're not getting if you just take one meaning and run with it. Like, you're always going to just hit a wall. And this is also what I speak on when I'm like, okay, yeah, the meaning of the angel numbers you're seeing will change. And how this can change, we can be really, really picky with it. It depends on what you want to get down with or what you feel called to get down with, because you can go deep with the specifications of an angel number meaning. Because you can look at the universal year, month, and day, and then take into account your personal year, month, and then day. And this is also in regards to your personal numerology of looking at that psychic, that destiny, and that name number. Then on top of that, you can even look at the planetary hours, because all of the numbers are ruled by planets. That's how this works. All the numbers are ruled by planets. So you can even take into planetary hours into account. Even if you don't have your birth time, like, you can go in deep. So you can see 555 in the morning, but 555 in the evening probably don't mean the same thing, because it's in a different planetary hour. If you wanted to be hyper specific, if that's even a word, like if you wanted to be real in its business, like, you can be that specific with it. And I think when people don't take that into account, it's like you're missing out on so much. And I'm not saying that you have to do that to define every single angel number, because that's tiring. I'll be very transparent right now. I see angel numbers all the time, especially in regards to numerological synchronicities of the 111s, the 444s, the 555s. I see them all the time. Do I sit and calculate them every single time I see them? Hell no. I don't. I don't. I really don't. And I don't encourage anybody else to hyper fixate on them at all either. And this is why I say that it's numbers that when you see them, you either get a feeling of, ooh, I need to pay attention to this, of it like grabs your attention. Pay attention to those. I'd say, okay, yes, let's look more into this. Or the ones that are following you, that you are like cannot escape from. Those are the ones you pay attention to. But if you're just seeing every once in a while, every now and again, this number, you're seeing numbers. It's like, I don't know what else you want from me. You're just seeing numbers. And it doesn't have to hold as much weight as people put onto it. And it's because also it's so gimmicky when people talk about certain numbers like that. And it's like, sometimes I definitely have been the person that at points in time was dipping into the fun of talking about angel numbers in regards to numerological synchronicities. When I was back on Twitter, I actually did a thread on which one is scarier, 444 or 555, and I'm thinking about reposting that on my Instagram, because it was honestly a fire thread. I definitely ate down. But also, even in defining those, I didn't look at those numbers up front and was like, okay, yeah, this number is scarier. I didn't even have like a preconceived notion. I was just like, we gonna go through this and we'll get to my assessment at the end. And I did determine which number, based off of the information I had, was scarier. And I'll probably just repost this so that you can see this. But it's just, I need you to understand that you don't have to pay attention so hyper fixated on type of attention on angel numbers. You really don't. You really don't. Especially numerological synchronicities. No, you don't need to. Again, I will say, if you get a feeling when you see the number, or the number is not trying to leave you alone, those are numbers you pay attention to. Forget the rest of them. Because it honestly becomes super overwhelming. Because also, when you're getting messages on messages on messages on messages, and you trying to define, you are going to get overwhelmed. I don't want you to get overwhelmed. There is no need. If you don't even have the energy for it, okay, you don't have the energy for it. If you don't have the energy for it, and you feel that push that you need to do it anyway, okay, pick whichever one you want to pick. But Let me reel myself back in, because obviously I feel very strongly about this. But I want to round this out by talking about how to define them, if you do want to define them. I don't know if I went over this already, but I want to go into defining in detail. So how I would define it is to look at the number that you're seeing. Let's say that it is a numerological synchronicity. It's 444, okay? 4 plus 4 plus 4 equals 12. 1 plus 2 equals 3. So now technically that 3 is an exalted 3, but I'm going to talk about exaltations later in another episode. But we're taking into account the number 4, the number 1, the number 2, and the number 3 in defining. So when you're taking that into account, you want to recognize the meaning of each number, which I'm going to release a guide on what each number means in the very near future. I would also say take into account the order that the numbers are in. So 4 is the first number that is in 444, even though it's the same number repeating itself. But when you add them together, you get 1 and 2, and then you also get 3. Now, I would say that I would put a little bit more emphasis on 3, just because 12 is technically 3's supplementary number, and it doesn't hold as much weight, but you want to take into account 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, if you peeped, that's a numerological pattern of 4, 3, 2, 1. We're counting down. So there's also impact in that. So which is also another conversation for another day. And also, even in explaining this and on how to define it right now, there's a lot of information that I'm not even trying to get into, because we would be here for, I promise you, we'd be here for easily an hour if I really sat down and broke down every little thing. And if you want me to talk about it that much, we might get there. But then you want to take whatever numbers you get. So we're going to focus in mainly on 4 and 3. We will still address 1 and 2. Where do 4 and 3 sit in your personal numerology? Do you have any 4s or 3s in your personal numerology? I'm talking about if you're born on the 30th, or your destiny/life path number is 4, or it's simplified from a 14 per se, and your life path 5, and this is why also supplementary numbers are very important. So looking to see, okay, do I have any of these numbers in my natural energy? And then on top of that, you can also take that and look at it in the technique that I've made and see, okay, I have, let's see, what order would that be in? I will have 3 over my 4, and I have 4 over my 5. So then taking that meaning into account. And I understand that I'm not giving you a lot of context on what these numbers mean, but this is also why I plan on doing a class on probably this topic, because you seem very invested. I'm not even gonna lie, you seem very invested, so I might as well help you out. But taking into account where those numbers sit, because for example, in this case, what did I say? 3 over 4. Okay. 3 has a lot of expansive energy. It's naturally lucky, but there also can be a hyperfixation energy to it that comes with it. It's sitting over 4. Now 3 and 4 sit in the numerological pattern of 3, 4, 5, but also sitting in the numerological pattern of 3, 4, and 7, I want to say, because 4 and 7 have a relationship, and 3 and 7 also have a relationship. There's a conversation, again, for another day. So taking into account 3 over 4, you're probably looking at something that's around expanding your relationship with spirit, per se, or allowing spirit to take up more space in your life, or to research your relationship with information, or relationship with spiritual guidance, or relationship with even just things changing. Just looking, it can be a looking deeper into something, because 3 can also be very intellectually stimulating. Now you have 4 over 5. Okay, 5 is a very internalized energy that can be very chaotic. I will not lie, that can be very chaotic of 4 over 5. It can be a sign of headaches, migraines, anxiety, intrusive thoughts. There's a lot of things that can happen with 4 over 5, but this is also not the only number conversation that you would get at with to get here to these meanings, so don't trip on that. But 4 over 5, you can have a lot of racing thoughts. This could also be something of you're getting a lot of downloads, a lot of channeling messages are coming through, or so seeing this 444 could be, hey, pay attention to the message you're receiving, or tap in, or give space for the messages to come in, or write down the messages that are coming in, because 5 is connected to that intellect, into that conversation as well. So and again, I'm not even going in as in depth as I could, because I want to keep this as like quick. I'm already talking longer than I planned on talking, but needless to say, or just trying to sum it up here, angel numbers are not something that are one meaning fits all. They're not something that will only be one-sided of just, it's gonna be, oh, you're in alignment, oh, this is happening, oh, this is coming. I just say be mindful of those meanings. If they resonate for you, they resonate for you. But also talking about resonating and just that stuff is a conversation in and of itself. But if it's something that you're like, yes, no, this feels right, go for it. But on a technical side, there's more to it. And also on top of that, all numbers can be have more than, well, not only more than one meaning, but they can also all have a level of protection, all have a level of warning or benefit. There's something beautiful and also really fucking horrific with all of the numbers. I will be 100% straight up with you about that, but I'm not trying to hold you that much longer. So I really hope you enjoyed this. Hit me up with any questions that you have, because this is a very broad topic, and if you want me to go even more into depth of doing like a part 2 to this, of, you know, talking in more in depth about what numbers mean, or even defining each angel number, even though I will tell you very straight up, full transparency, it pisses me off because it's going to be a very generalized meaning, and I can talk about these things for hours because it's such a broad topic. But if you enjoyed this, make sure you share this with somebody who also likes talking about numbers, or who also sees angel numbers. But, you know, thank you so much for listening. Yeah, I did have fun because I like talking about numbers and stuff anyways, but I'll catch you in the next one. Make sure you follow on IG and TikTok at Numbers with H. Jakari, and I'll see you later. Peace.